now to the Housing and Scrutiny Community Services Scrutiny Panel. Obviously, there's a renaming of this panel from the previous incarnation. It's our first meeting, and just to say welcome to you all, and I just hope for a productive meeting. Any ideas, views, please air them, and we'll move forward on that basis. So before we start these proceedings, may I bring to your attention some housekeeping matters. There's no expected fire alarm testing today. Therefore, if the fire alarm does sound, it's obviously a real fire. Please follow the signs to the nearest exit and meet at the assembly point in the Civic Square. Can I ask you all to please use your microphone when addressing the meeting, and that it is switched off if you're not using it. All mobile devices are kept as silent. This meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of subsequent repeated viewing by entering the waterside room. And during the course of this meeting, councillors are consenting to being filmed and to the use of these recordings for webcasting. Brings me on to the second point. The panel is asked to note the appointment of myself as chair, Lee Finn, and Councillor Tess Blight as vice chair for the Housing and Community Services Scrutiny Panel for 2024-25. In regard to apologies, obviously we've had Hannah on, who's unwell today, so she will be online, and as I said, we wish her all the best. Councillor Dingle has sent his apologies. Councillor Spotson substituting. Councillor Stevens has sent his apologies, and Councillor, was it Chris Zanuck? That's all right, I was worried about that. Will be substituting for Councillor Stevens, and Councillor Cudley has sent apologies. Councillor Penrose will be substituting. Is there any other apologies? Okay. So we move on to item number 3. Do any members have any declarations of interest with respect to any item on the agenda today? All right, thank you. And I ask the panel to note the its responsibilities as noted in page 1 and 2 of the agenda. Is there anything to be added or not? Everybody happy? Yeah. All right, so item number 5. The panel is asked to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of February 2024. And please note this, it was a performance, finance, customer focus overview and scrutiny panel, which has been changed to housing and communities, which you're attending today. Is there any comments with regard to any item on the previous minutes of the 21st of February? Is everybody happy with them? And can I sign them off as a true and accurate copy? Yep. Okay. So that's ready to sign. Under Chair's urgent business, like I said previously, it's just to welcome you all to this committee. Don't be afraid to voice your opinions, concerns, or whatever. If there's something you disagree with, obviously make it known, and hopefully we can try and find a resolution to any issues that arise. Other than that, there is no Chair's urgent business. Which brings me now to Serious Violence Duty Action Plan funding proposal. It's contained in pages 9 to 30 of your pack. And may I introduce Sally, at this point, Cabinet Member for Community Safety, Libraries, Events, Cemeteries and Crematoria, who will introduce the report. I open the floor to you, Sally.
Thank you, Chair. It is a little bit of a mouthful, isn't it? But before I introduce this report, Chair, please can I give my thanks for moving this item to today due to me being on holiday. I feel very passionate that as a portfolio holder, I introduce my reports, not an officer. So as you would have seen, and I would hope everyone has read their papers, but in January 2023, the government announced a new duty that required local areas to work in partnership to prevent and reduce serious violence. There is a national definition, but local areas each agree their own definition, whilst there are a slight difference regionally and nationally, all are very similar, and to seek to address the use of threat of violence and harmful behaviour. We want Plymouth to be a city where everyone can lead their lives free from violence and fear of violence. To support this ambition, Plymouth has been awarded 125k funding from the Home Office. This has been shared across several different projects and interventions to tackle a broad range of issues. Some of the funding is being spent on training to improve reporting violence. Some has supported the Impact project to prevent offending and reoffending by children. There are awareness raising campaigns, funding to listen to and work with communities to better understand how the impact of violence and how agencies can better support in preventing violence from happening. Also, how to better respond to victims and other interventions and creations. Initiatives being supported to continue additional capacity or trial new approaches. Each will regularly be monitored and feedback will be sent to the Home Office regularly via the OPCC. All of this builds existing work, including our VORG and our DASV and obviously our Police and Crime Commissioner supports work. The OPCC have convened a role in delivering this duty. As such, the Home Office funding was awarded to a 4 upper tier community partnership via the OPCC. The reports will be sent to the OPCC quarterly in line with the national measurements, which are to see a reduction in hospital admissions for assaults with knife or sharp objects, reduction in crime type recorded by the police, and a reduction in homicides recorded by the police. In Plymouth, we have agreed several additions, local indicators: improve feeling of safety, reduce in recording of violent crimes, reduce in the number of children entering the criminal justice system, reduction in reoffending of violent crimes, reduction in the number of children excluded from school, reduction in the number of 16 and 17-year-olds not in education, employment or training. DASV and VORG related offences are monitored through the DASV board and feed into Safer Plymouth. This ensures all this work is tied together. You have been provided with a briefing document which lists each of the projects and highlights 2. This is to give you an overview of the vast array of actions and work underway. So basically, I could carry on reading, but I'm sure you've all read it. I know Tracy's got some slides, and I would prefer to sit here and be questioned than just to blatter on to you, Chair, if you don't mind. So I know Tracy's got some slides, if you don't mind me handing over to Tracy.
No, that's absolutely fine.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sally, and thanks, Chair. Hannah, can you bring the next slide up for me, please? Thank you. Thank you. I thought it would be useful just to give a little overview of where the kind of duty came from and why we find ourselves where we are today. So in 2023, the government kind of devolved down to community safety partnerships that we needed to work together to reduce and eliminate serious violence in our local areas. To do that, they said that we had to work alongside the police, the National Probation Service, Fire and Rescue and Health Authority as the specified authorities. So that they're the 5 authorities who have a legal duty to kind of deliver this work. But alongside that, they recognise the importance of education institutions, prison and youth custodial establishments, and communities in the voluntary sector. So although they're not specified authorities, in Plymouth we've been very keen to make sure that we're a little bit broader than the 5 specified authorities, because we definitely appreciate that there are more people with more things to offer, and that by working together we can kind of deliver a better service. So to do that, Hannah, we could move on to the next slide if that's okay. Thank you. We we adopted a public health approach, and although I'm not an expert in public health, so if anyone in the room is, forgive my layman's view of it, but essentially what it does is it strips back what we see as the outcome of something, and it tells us to look at what's actually causing it, and it's only by really working with what causes it that we'll ever truly solve our bigger issues in society. So the things that we know make you more likely to be a victim or a perpetrator of violence are things like adverse childhood experiences, poor mental health, parents having custodial sentences, and all of these kind of wider determinants, which we definitely understand. £125,000 from the Home Office isn't going to get fixed in Plymouth, but what it did do is it gave us a small platform to try and test some little things that we could say, actually, this feels like it's having a really positive impact, so let's carry on and see what we can do, see if we can draw some more funding in. Or it doesn't feel like it's having any kind of impact. You know, is there any national evidence that tells us that it's not going to work? We recognise that some of this money had to be put around preventing violence from happening in the first place. Some of it is to work with those who've actually committed violence, to try and understand why and try and understand whether we can work with them to prevent it from happening again. And some of it is around even deeper than that, which we've actually focused some of our attention on those people who have thoughts of harm, particularly around children, and actually, is there a way to give those people safely a space to work through that, to prevent that harm from ever occurring, which is really contentious, it's really difficult, but there's probably a real space for it nationally, and we're kind of leading the way in that because we're in phase 2 of where that piece of work is. Okay, Hannah, we can do the next one, please. Thank you. So our needs assessment was 120 pages long. I don't know if anybody's read the whole 120 pages. It is published. And it really went in depth. So we used all of the data that we could find from anyone and everyone. We used a lot of kind of narrative, a lot of conversation. We spoke to communities, we spoke with children. And what it showed us was that there are times and places in the city where people don't feel as safe as they should, that some communities feel that they're impacted more by violence, so our BME communities, young people, women, girls, so that it told us some things that we already knew, so it gave us that data, but it did also give us a few new areas that we felt we could use this money to really explore. There's some data on the screen there, which is in the needs assessment, and it does show that that violence with injury and sexual offences as a city, our data doesn't show us in a very good light. So that's again given us an area of focus where we could try and put some of our attention to work with Devon and Cornwall Police and all of those specified authorities and communities to see how we could bring that down. Hannah, we can move on, please. Thank you. So this is some actual kind of quotes from people. So I won't read them out. This is just what people in Plymouth were telling us. And actually this was information that we were taking from professionals. And I think as a city, we've moved away from only working in evidence and data, where historically we would have kind of said, there is no data that shows that Plymouth has an issue with knife crime and children. But anecdotally, youth workers and teachers are telling us that they think that more children are carrying knives, and that those children are carrying knives because they think that their friends are carrying knives or that other people are carrying knives. And historically, we probably wouldn't have really resourced that too much because there's no data. Devon and Cornwall Police aren't coming to us and saying that's a problem. So we've moved away from that, and we're trying to be much better at kind of really working with the whole picture rather than just being focused on data, while still accepting nationally, data is what tends to bring us our funding. You know, if we go out with data, generally that's where we get funded. We don't have a violence reduction unit. We're not funded fully to have a violence reduction unit, and that's because our data definitely wouldn't show Plymouth as a place that would need one. But that's not to say we don't have work to do. Thanks, Hannah. So the model, again, this was a bit of work done by Laura Jewett actually in public health, and the underlying message was violence is preventable and everybody has a role. So whether you work in adults, children's, whether you work in safeguarding, whether you're a ward counsellor or you know, me and my role, it's something that we can all kind of really play a part in. And the vision was, we just want everybody to live here, be free of violence, free of the fear of violence. It felt really stripped back, but everybody really liked the simplicity of this is our vision. And And then we recognised that we had to do lots of different things in lots of different ways to try and work towards it. And then they haven't been put on this slide in order of priority, but actually the top one, which is challenging that harmful culture and social norm thing, is probably the underlying area of work. You know, we need our young people to be challenged on what they think about pornography and sex and what they're seeing online. We need to be really open about how we talk about violence against women and girls, and we need to be comfortable in that space. So challenging that, and one of the projects that we funded with this funding is nationally innovative, and it's really quite exciting. And I went and spoke about it at a regional event with the Police and Crime Commissioner and the other local authorities, and it's the one thing that everybody kind of sat up and really wanted to be part of. So that's quite exciting. So we're working really hard on that. Trauma responsive approaches and practice. So the trauma responsive approach, we think we do really well as a city, but what we need to do is make sure that people put it into practice, that we don't just talk about it. Sharing the responsibility for supporting victims and the people who cause harm. Supporting people who cause harm can cause some people to feel really uncomfortable. It can be quite contentious, but actually that's how we stop people from being violent, as well as making sure we respond really well to our victims and survivors. And then this last one, relational based programs and initiatives. So this is about making sure the city is open to this, and that we're going to listen, and that we're going to kind of have this approach. Thanks, Hannah. So this is a virtual breakdown of what we've done. There's one slight error on there. Man culture, it says we ordered it £15,000 when we based our figures initially on what we thought we were going to be allocated, and we just got a few thousand less than we did. So that's actually £11,000. So Purple Flag is one, I think, that Councillor Hayden's talked about, and actually this is an accreditation scheme, but it's more than that. It actually ensures that as a city we're all working together to keep people safe in the nighttime economy. And over the last 12 months there's been some really good initiatives kind of to bolster that. So we now have a working group. Christina Browning, who works in community safety, set up a group with Devon and Cornwall Police, and they look at males in the nighttime economy who haven't committed an offence but are acting in a predatory manner, and we use civil tools and powers to deal with that when they haven't stepped into the criminal threshold, and we offer them an opportunity for support and change. That has a really high success rate. It's got small numbers, but every predator that you potentially stop, it's kind of immeasurable. So that's supporting the Purple Flag along with everything else that happens there. Man culture is the one that's kind of got everybody sitting up and taking notice. So this is a group of men from a number of organisations who came together and created the Male Allyship Network, which is a network of men who recognise that that we need the voice of men to support women, to prevent violence against women and girls. We need men to be leading conversations and kind of displaying the behaviours that we would want to see from boys in the city. And one of the members of Man Culture is a chap called Ben Dunks, who's an author, and alongside being a founder member of Man Culture, he has a business in his own right, and that business is he goes into schools and colleges when invited, and he talks to boys and girls around violence, sexual violence, pornography, and kind of the impact that that's having, the Andrew Tate effect. So we've got two really kind of exciting pieces of work happening there that are aligned with our overall work and aligned with everything else, but they're standalone projects. The Impact project is now known as the Pathfinder, and that is youth justice. So for about 4 years, they've been working with young people who are violent or on the periphery of violence, and they see violence, and they've been offered kind of bespoke interventions to help and to prevent them from probably stepping into that criminal sphere. That project is an incredible piece of work. It's managed by Martina Aquilina, and financially they have lost funding this year from the Ministry of Justice. So there's going to be a gap there with what they can kind of continue to provide. As you all know, this is only a 12-month opportunity, so we've bolstered it for this 12-month period, but that doesn't go any further, unfortunately. Serious violence bystander training is incredible. We've already gone out to commissioning for that to have professionals to deliver that for us. Preventing offending in child sexual abuse is, again, this is a campaign run by the NSPCC, who sit as part of Safer Plymouth, called the Stop It Now campaign. It has a huge reach, and it will launch in August. harm prevention phase. This is one that people can find quite tricky. So this is in phase 2 of a scoping period, and this is the NSPCC and partners, including Plymouth City Council, looking for national evidence and local understanding as to how we can work with those who have harmful thoughts around children, and whether the city is ready for something like that. You know, it's not as simple as we can just go ahead and do it. So that's scoping was last year, and we've moved into phase 2, and that is a really interesting conversation that that I think we should all be aware of. And then lastly, community projects. It sounds a bit vague. It was intentional. It was because we didn't know what was going to come up through the year. We didn't know whether a particular type of violence would be prevalent. We want to use some of that with understanding how our BME community specifically are impacted by violence. Potentially female migrant workers, there might be something there that we need to look at. Councillor Hayden's really keen that we also look at children whose families are involved in violence and violent crimes, and making sure that they're not left behind. So that's what that pot of money's for. And finally, we did allocate some funding to a cross-border piece of work with Devon, which was around speech and language therapy for children. Many children who are kind of being sucked into the criminal justice system have really kind of low literacy levels. For logistical reasons in the health service, that hasn't really played out. And so rather than keeping that allocation of funds there for 12 months and us not having an outcome from it, we've withdrawn the funding to reallocate into the rest of the projects. Hannah, is there another slide? Oh, there is. Oh, I've talked through them all. I've done it. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that presentation, Tracy and Sally. With regard to the strategy, one thought comes to mind, say with probation, obviously, where they have senior manager with probation up there now. If any members, is it worth, do you think, bringing them before us to discuss the new strategies in hand with regard to violence and violent offending? And one thing we're aware of is that all the offending programmes are currently changing. They've got all the latest statistics, and there's possibility of possibly other funding avenues. So would people like them to come before us and offer a current situational perspective?
Chair, I certainly never turn down any opportunity of funding. So if you can, anyone can come forward with some more funding, different avenues, then by all means, if that's what you're asking, yeah, by all means.
And just for all the members here as well, is obviously be aware community payback exists up there, and they're constantly looking for work to do in the communities that you all serve. So yeah, again, if there's anything, or you want to make a contact or you need a contact point, don't hesitate to contact us. If they can be used in your community to betterment your community, then it's there to be used. I'll take Councillor Nicholson first, and then Councillor Gosser.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. Certainly a very interesting area of work. I don't know, outside the meeting, if you could perhaps supply members with a bit more context of sort of categorisation of crime in Plymouth. So we talk about knife crime, we talk about the evening economy, but could they be categorised sort of violent crime, what's emanated from the nighttime economy? Because I think it would be useful just to put that into context, particularly as the council has a role in certain areas of the nighttime economy, but equally other areas of crime where perhaps the City Council could play a more active part. But without a baseline, I'm not quite sure what necessarily the council can do personally. So that'd be very helpful. And I don't know if there's an aspiration to achieve obviously we always wish there'd be less crime, but is there a wish in the next sort of 12 months, 18 months, 24 months to see in the areas that we're doing work a target that we're seeking to achieve a reduction in criminal activity? So it'd be useful, perhaps after the meeting, if that could be shared at some point, please.
So in terms of what we're trying to achieve with the funding, the measurables from the Home Office are so big that we weren't sure that that we would see a real impact. You know, it's, you know, the number of homicides, you know, with the exception of what happened in Keam, we don't have a great number, you know, as our baseline, which is great, which is why we have hoped to see a reduction in hospital admissions with, you know, bladed articles and also the things that do link but not quite so directly around kind of school exclusions, young people not in education. The crime data we can definitely provide. What I would say is we're just coming into our annual strategic crime assessment time of year. So the Community Safety Partnership will run a series of morale workshops. Morale is kind of the matrix that we use to measure how much of a priority something needs to be for the city. It stands for Management of Risk in Law Enforcement. It's a bit of a blunt tool. It's used for organised crime groups actually, but it does work. So in Plymouth, what we will do is we'll pull together all of the data and narrative around serious violence, around domestic abuse, sexual violence, VOG, hate crime, drug use. So and possibly that might be of real interest, I guess, to this group, because what we could do then is show you what the priorities are for the next 12 months for the Community Safety Partnership, but also why, you know, kind of how that was determined. And then each one of those areas will measure to check progress to understand whether the work that's being done is reducing whatever crime type that might be. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you very much, because I think it is important that that members have a bit more information about what the, you know, serious crime scene is in Plymouth, what the sort of areas of concern and criminality exist, and really what the aspiration is. Obviously, we like zero crime, but the reality is we're probably never going to have that. But we ought to be driving to targets, and probably using the scrutiny power as a means of informing the public, because, you know, a lot of these areas of criminality, potentially intelligence from the community could assist in the detection and conviction of criminals. So, you know, it's probably an education piece here for your area of the council to use this committee on the population at large. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Patrick, for your contribution. Jeremy?
Thank you, Chair. So I was really excited and then slightly disappointed by the loss of the project with the speech and language therapists. So as I'm sure you know, the vast majority of school exclusions are due to behavioural difficulties, and reports show that those with emotional and behavioural disorders, 70% of those will have language deficits. The vast majority of those are undiagnosed. Further studies show that early intervention from speech and language therapists can really make a huge difference to children, especially on their emotional development and also their job prospects and a life course, and whether they're going to be in contact with the justice system. So can you give me a bit more detail about why this wasn't taken forward? Is it a limitation on resources and access to speech and language therapists? I know they're thin on the ground.
It was exactly that. So the reason we'd had to, and it's always good to actually share with our Peninsula colleagues anyway, because obviously we share the learning, we'd kind of co-funded with Devon, who'd funded the lion's share, because we didn't have enough funding in the £125,000 across them, and it was that they just couldn't find the resource to commit to it. What I can tell you is Plymouth Criminal Justice, Youth Justice, has a speech and language therapist embedded in the Impact programme, which is really good and quite unusual. Again, with the Ministry of Justice funding ending this year, I don't know whether that is at risk, but yeah, I don't disagree that what you're describing there about children is factually happening, and therefore speech and language therapy is really vital, but there was no resource for them to actually commit to doing what they said they would do in the bid.
Just have to follow up. Do you mean resource as in money, or resource as in access to personnel?
Access to personnel to actually deliver the work.
Right, thank you, Jeremy. Neil?
Question is around the purple flag. Understand it's an international award. Is this something we've just got, or has it been, we had it before? And do they throw these awards around like confetti? Does everybody get them, or is it, you know?
Unfortunately, no, they don't throw it around like confetti. Lots of hard work goes into it. So I could probably tell you from the UK to Ireland, there's 70 cities that actually have the purple flag. So we received our first purple flag in 2019. We took administration in 18, and I was portfolio holder again for community safety then. And I was asked by the police if the local authority would support it. People were very concerned about supporting it because other local authorities had failed rapidly, and there is nothing worse than giving somebody something and then taking it away. It makes your city look really bad. And I just thought, well, let's go for it. Let's get the partners together. I have to say, Kat MacDonald, who she really did keep hold of this with Dave Moore, who was from the police as well. And lots of partners got involved. So, you know, from the purple flag, you end up, if I talk too much, you're going to have to shut me up because I'm very passionate about this purple flag. We haven't only just been the first city in the UK and Ireland to put the application in, but actually be awarded the purple flag and 2 other awards on top of that. So Plymouth should be very, very proud of the work that we've done. And we've kept that year on year. On the 17th of August, we have assessors coming back down to Plymouth again to see if we're worthy to keep the flag. I'm feeling very confident in this room. Feeling very nervous because once again you wouldn't want to lose it. But what the purple flag actually does is it brings lots of people on board, so Best Bar None, Pub Watch, your street pastors, your taxi marshals. So it makes people feel safe. You know, there's lots of stuff. We've got the purple, I'm trying to call them, the press the purple, that's the word I was looking for, which my predecessor, Rebecca Smith, actually helped put in. So this has been a joint partnership, if you want. We have kept this as non-political, if you want to put it that way. This is something to be very proud of. So if you, I don't know, for instance, you were having one of your young people were wanting to start university in the city, this flags up very quickly that it's a safe space for your young person to come here and be educated. You know, restaurants are involved in it, like I say, bars, culture, art, a whole range of stuff. So, yeah, it's something we really should be shouting about, Neil. It's, yeah, very proud. And hopefully I'll be able to tell you that we're going to keep it. If not, I've got egg on my face, haven't I? But, yeah, a lot of work goes into it.
Don't worry, if you don't keep it, you'll be brought before the committee to answer to why. Needless to say, Lewis?
Yeah, thank you. I just had a question on the risk section of the paperwork. It says that the funding is for this current financial year. You state in the risk section that we didn't receive confirmation from the Home Office what the conditions of the grant would be until May, which is only 2 months in already. We're now 4 months in. Could you tell us, is that usual for this kind of funding? And what impact will it have on the partners who are delivering the projects?
It's not supposed to be usual. When you're awarded a 12 months funding, I would imagine anyone in this room would understand that when you apply for funding, you have projects in mind ready to literally get going. And while you have a delay in that, it does cause a mass problem for projects. Some of these projects will be staffing cost, which causes a problem as well. I'm very disappointed it took so long, but I'm assured by everybody who is involved in this that they'll be able to achieve that. And I can assure you myself that the money will be spent because I don't have money back. But, you know, if we're going to apply for funding, then we need to have it on time so we can carry these projects out and give the whole full 12 months of reassurance to people.
Sorry, just follow up. Is there any remit for us as a committee to raise this as an issue? I'm not sure. I take guidance from yourself or officers on what the best course of action would be. But of course, it's obviously having some level of impact on the delivery of the projects that we've only got 2/3 of the year to spend that money. Is there anything we can do as a committee to raise that as an issue or change that?
Yeah, it's anything that people want to bring before us is if it's an issue you feel it's important and the committee feels it's important, I'm sure we can sort of work something into the work programme. Or, like I've said previously, it doesn't have to be in a formal setting like this. We can have an informal meeting to discuss an issue like that and then bring the suggestions forward. I'm more than happy to do that, whichever way the members feel suits them best, basically. Sally, have you got anything on that? Sorry.
I personally would like a recommendation, obviously, to go to the Police and Crime Commissioner to say that, you know, you're holding on to this money, release it on time. This isn't the first project that I've had this problem with. There's been other projects in the city centre. I won't go into too much detail, but we had some antisocial behaviour with young people. We were promised some money. We were all ready to go for it. And the money was delayed again. So, you know, as a city, we don't have the money to put in. You know, the Police and Crime Commissioner has that funding. If she's going to deliver it like she's supposed to, then I feel that we need to be putting a little bit of pressure in the most nicest way onto her. Because when you're starting to look at, like, you know, for here, like, you know, a first quartile of looking at what work we've done, obviously we've done none because we've had no funding. Everything was ready to go. So, you know.
No, thank you for that, Sally. I think if members are happy with it at the end, you know, towards the end of this meeting, we'll look at the work programme. Perhaps we could work up a form of words, a proposal, and make a recommendation, and take that recommendation forward today rather than leave it till a later date. If members are happy with that.
Just on that point, Chair, I don't think we should be apologetic. If the money's there and we need to spend it, we should be forcefully asking for it. So fully support us, you know, being robust in our representations. Don't always get you everywhere, Sally.
Just Lewis, quickly.
Yeah, maybe we could just report that this conversation happened, or send the minutes of this meeting, and this, where we recommend that we send the minutes to the Police and Crime Commissioner, just that we've raised it as an issue, that it's always having an impact on the delivery of these projects.
Yeah, happy to do that. To note that we write specifically to finance and ask them speed that up and make sure the allocation is available to yourself. Is everybody happy with that?
Thank you, Chair. And, you know, I'm not just trying to shrug a shoulder here. It is, I personally raise it at Police and Crime Panel as well. So I'm not trying to get somebody to do my other dirty work for me. But, you know, it is something I try and raise at Police and Crime Panel. So I try and get every avenue I can.
Yeah, and it's much appreciated, all the work that you do, Sally. So, Ian?
Thank you, Chair. So I can actually advocate for one of these projects in here, the Man Culture Project. I attended the conference last year and it was absolutely fantastic. It's very well attended. Benjamin Dunks, as you mentioned, is one of the contributors to that event as well. And I found his presentation to just be really inspiring. I went and it made me think a hell of a lot around you know, how men behave within society and what young people are exposed to as well. So I actually had an informal conversation with him just at the weekend, bumped into him, and he's doing some great work in Exeter in tertiary colleges there at the present moment. So it'd be fantastic to see him in Plymouth doing something similar as well. So yeah, I mean, my question was actually related to the funding, but I do have another one. With the funding, though, the money is there. It's been secured. It's with the Police and Crime Commissioner. I would hate to see these projects like the Man Culture Project being held up in any way. I mean, is the current administration prepared to put some of that cost at risk to move projects along before drawing down the funding from the Police and Crime Commissioner?
Sally, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, so we've actually got the money now. We've actually got the money. And can I be very cheeky and Chair and say thank you for coming last year to Man Culture Conference, and it was absolutely inspiring. And I don't know if you realised, but you actually made a bit of history because it was the first conference and we were the first city to hold Man Culture. So once again, a #1 for this city. And I'm sure there'll be tickets available for the conference in September if anybody would like to come. That's a little bit of a plug, so.
Yeah.
Most certainly recommend anyone to go to that conference in September. I do have one other question, though, if I may, and that's just in relation to the other project, and that's the bystander training. I noticed under that, and that is very well welcomed in the city, by the way. I think it's absolutely essential. To see 500 people going through that course, plus the trainer-trainer option, I think is brilliant. That's going to have a huge impact. There's a part here around co-production of that bystander training programme, and I just wanted to make sure that the trans community and women of colour are involved in that co-production as well, and to what extent they're involved.
So interestingly, there are two separate things that we're commissioning. So absolutely there will be. So we're working with Changing Futures, who have kind of supported us with a lot of our engagement work, and we're also working with the peer researchers across the city, who obviously represent some of our diverse communities. In terms of specific communities, we will co-produce with anyone who's relevant. So we've approached the REC, for example, and Plymouth Hope when we're thinking about our BME communities, and we will work with Intercom Trust and any organisation who can add value to make sure that when we're asking the questions, we're asking the right questions, and also that we're trying to be as relatable as possible to really understand the impact that people are feeling when violence is occurring. The transgender in particular, last year was the 3rd most prevalent hate crime, and although we're talking relatively small numbers, it was the spike that caused obviously such significant concern. So racially motivated hate crime was kind of the most prevalent, followed by disableist hate crime, and then it was into transgender. And so we have definitely got an eye on it. And also, I guess, for everybody around the table, if anyone has specific people that you think we need to kind of have a conversation with, then we're definitely open to that. We would welcome it. Okay.
Okay, Tess.
It's to pick up on what Patrick said earlier in terms of a detailed breakdown. Could that also include information about our statistical neighbours? Because I'm sure my colleagues around the room are also aware that our residents often feel that we're the worst at everything rather than the best at everything. Now, Plymouth is a fantastic city, and if we just generate this information, we can create a sense that actually it's terrible here, when actually maybe it's not as bad as some people fear. So a plea that we see some statistical neighbour data as well.
Yeah, absolutely. In the strategic needs assessment for the violence work, for example, we did do quite a lot of comparison with our most similar family groups, which in some areas of very specific crime, it showed us as not doing very well, but in other areas it showed that we were quite exceptional. And then just overall in terms of crime nationally, we are still considered to be a very safe city to live in, and you're right, we shouldn't lose sight of that, although it's really important that that we are tackling serious violence and we're doing our very best. We don't want to raise fear disproportionately, so we will be really mindful, and yes, we can definitely ensure that we provide comparables that are kind of relevant to what's being asked. That's not a problem.
Thank you, that's great.
Okay.
So the final one, Stefan, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just on one of the slides that we had, I was shocked to see quite a huge number of 80%, 25% on increase of the in reports of the actions that are taken in our city. I just wonder how that data is collated. Is that collated because the people are more open to report it, or is it collated through mass data gathering from different partner organizations? If you can just give us input on that, please. Thank you.
I'll go for the first bit, and then Benford
okay,
is the second bit. So I welcome more reporting, the figures going up, Stefan, because that means that we're actually doing a good job about the advertisement that's going out, or our partners that are going out, and explaining to people how they can report it in so many different ways. So yes, we are seeing a higher number of reports, but that's because we're advertising better. I don't know if Tracy wants to come a little bit more technical than that.
That really does cover it. But in regards to the actual data that you were seeing on the screen, that was collected over about 16 months, and it came from every single agency in the city that had any data to give. We were relentless because we wanted to get as wide a picture as possible, and sometimes that data almost didn't really make sense even to us, but we felt it relevant to include it so people can ask their questions. We always welcome seeing a spike. Actually, when we do a concerted piece of work, we do generally see a spike. So the national news this week is obviously very focused on violence against women and girls, and the national data showing that it continues to be a real prevalent and significant issue. I anticipate that in Plymouth we will see a spike in reports. We welcome it. I'm not sure that we collectively always have the capacity to soak it up when that happens, but we still we would rather know. And hate crime, I would have to say, is still vastly underreported, and anything we can do to increase reporting of hate crime, but also increase our response to how well we deal with it, is something we should be really still aiming for, I think. Just answer, yeah.
Yeah, just to come back to you on that, Tracy, is it reasonable to suggest that some of it, the statistics are actually starting at a low base, therefore the rises must be taken into context? So if it's a 25% rise, but it's only from a very low base, and it can seem an extraordinary rise in the amount of crime taking place, when in fact it has to be put into context.
Yeah, which is why, if I'm honest, so for example, when I talked about the workshops that will take place over summer to help us with the strategic crime assessment, the main database that comes in first is from Devon and Cornwall Police. And without context around it, sometimes that data can kind of really make you anxious, because you'll see a huge spike in something, which is why we always have an analyst from Devon and Cornwall Police and or a senior police officer sat in that workshop with us so they can explain it to us. So the year that violence without injury, the recording of violence without injury 3 years ago was changed, and it in that year it included online offences, and it created a national spike of about 300%. And if that had just come into a workshop with partners, you know, we absolutely would have panicked and we would have not understood it. So some of it is definitely around us understanding the data, understanding if it's coming from a really low base, you know, in terms of numbers. And sometimes numbers rather than percentages are more helpful, and sometimes both are better. But yeah, we do have to be really careful around what that baseline number was before we jump too much, because we do panic sometimes.
Needless to say, I'd like to bring this to a close now. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Sally, for a very in-depth reporting on the subject. And just to pass, I think it is a good news story and something we need to be proud of. And thank you for yourselves and all the staff and all the members that have been involved in making it the success it is. And keep up the good work, and we'll hold you to account for the flag. If it doesn't happen, don't worry, we will not forget that. It's been noted. So therefore, before the committee is that we endorse the reduction in violence action plan. Is all members in favour of that?
Chair, we're going to add the second recommendation, are we? To write to the Police and Crime Commissioner?
Yes, that's already been noted.
All right, all right, that's all
yeah,
agreed.
that's already been
Okay.
noted.
As long as it's captured in the recommendation.
Yeah, and
I was going to say I'm just writing up a wording now. I'll bring it up at the end of the meeting to make sure everyone's happy with the wording. But I'm drawing something up now.
Right, thank you for Hannah. So, so we're all in approval. Everybody's happy with that? Yeah. Okay. Again, thank you very much for your time. All right. Just to welcome Councillor Chris Penworthy. Sorry we're 2 minutes late on the schedule. Cabinet Member for Housing, Cooperative Development and Communities will introduce the report. The report is the Plan for Public Toilets Review. It's a verbal report, and it must be noted that this is more an interim update as opposed to the full and completed report.
Thank you. I'm hoping Anne Thorpe might join me online. She is. Anne's actually off sick at the moment, so thank you very much, Anne, for joining in this afternoon. Full Council asked us to come back to the January meeting of this committee. So it'd be fair to say that actually we've not really done very much yet, and there are very good reasons for us not having done very much yet. So I just wanted to tell you what those were. Facilities management as part of a sort of conglomeration of corporate property and facilities management, hard and soft, has been under significant pressure over the last few years at strategic and operational level. So, for example, Andy Rolfs, who was the strategic director, began a process and then left the council. Rolf Bint, who was the facilities manager, hard services, was left and under the restructure. Kim Brown, who picked up the work, has left the council, and Giles Perrett, who picked it up, is now off sick. Anthony Payne picked it up from Giles, and we all know he's about to leave the council, and a new chief operating officer hasn't yet arrived. So at strategic level, across corporate property, hard and soft FM, there's been a lot of change. And similarly, with losing one of the three senior leads and not having that replaced, Dan, one of the others, taking up one of the other roles, then leaving and only just having been replaced, his replacement only arriving 6 weeks ago. Anne has been trying to run everything for quite a lot of time. That means we, as well as the pressures in lack of surveyors and others within the team, we have had to make some really tough decisions about the last few months. We have ensured that staff welfare in our own buildings has been predominant, and health and safety of our staff when they're out about in our premises. We've been looking to ensure that we manage our budgets well, especially where those budgets are external and have time limits on them. So we don't want to not manage a project, which means we have to give lots of money back, because that would be pretty disastrous for the city and our reputation. And we've been looking at health and safety and risk, and those have been our top 3 priorities. As I'm sure you can guess, the public toilet strategy hasn't quite hit there. We've had some early conversations, but only early conversations. Just to give you an idea of what we have achieved in the last 6 months, we've introduced some more robust budget monitoring. We've managed the budget on the Plymouth Guildhall refurb, where the quotes came in at twice the budget. And we've done all of the value engineering. That those contracts are going to be let within the next week. So the internal works will be starting any time now. The contractors are geared up for that. That means that we don't lose the future high street funding that's paying for all the work. So that has had to be a really key part of our decision making. The external works on the Guildhall, we have progressed, because if we didn't do that when we did the internal works, we'd just have water ingress. The scaffolding at the front will be coming down, I'm sure you'll all be pleased to hear, in the next couple of weeks, once the pigeon brood have fledged and left the nest, but we did get nesting on the scaffolding. But we have been doing all of that. We've been dealing with issues at Mountbatten, where the landing stage has had a number of significant faults identified with it that make it not safe, but we've had to keep services running because that's a water taxi service, water ferry services. And we've been working with the National Marine Park to develop the Water Sports Centre over at Mountbatten and their piers and pontoons as part of the National Marine Park funding. Tinside Lido, we've been doing our works to it and making sure that ties in with the National Marine Park's work, so that we secure all that funding and do the works necessary at the right times and in the right orders, because some are being paid for by the council and some are being paid for by the National Lottery. And we've also made sure that we look after our seafront. So Tinside Bay has had quite a lot of work done to it at our expense. Firestone Bay works are almost complete and Jennycliff Beach is now open again.
Those are all big things that we had to do because it was for the reputation of the city. We've also been working with the Theatre Royal. There's been major leaks in the fly tower roof. If we didn't deal with those, then the electrics would be damaged and the theatre would have to close. That wasn't something we were prepared to deal with, so that got upped the rankings. We had some fire risk assessment done at Chelsea Meadow, so we've installed appropriate sprinkler systems throughout there. We're working with Plymouth Active Leisure on things that they have spotted needed to be done at the Life Centre. And one bit of toilets work. A few years ago, we did promise to do some work at St Budo, and we have been progressing that, and we will soon have that project completed. So the team have been working really hard. I felt it was more important until we had staff in that they got on and did all of that and the day-to-day job. We will later in the summer, be announcing a public toilets champion. And that, I think, our thanks to a councillor who's prepared to stand up and be the face of public toilets in the city, because that's never going to be an easy job. And we will be coming back to you with the report. And I hasten to say, our public toilets work before has never been a public document. It's been an internal working document. We, for the first time as an administration, are going to be really open with the people of Plymouth about what our budgets are and how we're going to use those budgets, the different ways we're looking at attracting inward investment to support public toilet provision, and what that might mean. There's all sorts of models around the country. We're going to be looking at those for best practice, and we will publish. But we won't sign off and publish until we've been here, and we hope that will be at the January meeting. Chair, if we do need to slip one, please beg indulgence, but it has been because of all the changes that I've just outlined. We are working on it, but at the moment it has been, what do we need to do? What does Anne need to start getting in train in order for us to be able to do that work? And I therefore haven't got anything real I can tell you at this point, but I do look forward to coming back to a meeting in the future to talk about public toilets and be joined by our new champion on that in doing so.
Thank you very much, Chris, for that report. We as a committee, fully respect the needs that prioritisation must take centre stage here. However, we were a bit worried that the issue had been flushed away because it's taken so many months, and with so many directors suddenly disappearing. Obviously, with respect to visitors, disabled, and people working in the service industry, it is an aspect of need. So can I bring in Councillor Nicholson?
Thank you, Chair, and can I thank Councillor Penberthy and Anne, particularly. We hope you're better soon, and thanks for joining the call. But for your openness and honesty in terms of the challenges in facilities management. So I think you've done absolutely the right thing, Councillor Penberthy, in prioritising the projects you've prioritised. All I would say is just manage your expectations. If it slips because it's not ready, then it's better to have it done, piece of work done properly and presented, than rush just to meet a date. To be honest, this has been something that the council as a whole has sort of talked about for a number of years. So a few more months delay, I wouldn't think necessarily will have a massive impact. But I think it's important that the work's done correctly and we go through the right process of involving the local community, because these assets are, particularly for older people, particularly vital, and therefore we need to be, as a local authority, making the right decisions. So commend you for your honesty, Councillor Penberthy, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. I don't want to delay any further than necessary. I did make a commitment to council that I would bring it back within the year, and that is what we are still working to, and why I have said please beg indulgence if we slip by one meeting cycle. I wouldn't want to slip more than one meeting cycle. I think for too long this hasn't been in the public domain. I don't think people have been able to see what's going on or understand that, and to understand where we are already in partnership with people. So I've had a number of emails today about the public toilets underneath the cafe in Tinside Bay, but those are run by the cafe now, not by us. It's a partnership with business, and the business has had its business reasons for closing those toilets, and it's not therefore our issue that those particular toilet provisions are are closed. So, you know, the people who've written to me today about that have been told that. So, but we need to be open about that. We need to be open about where the options are and where the costs are. And if people then want to think about things that in communities, and we get more community-led provision, that they understand what the implications of that are and where we can and can't help, because I don't have a magic money tree. So I think, you know, I want to be honest, and would like this to be a more public document as well. We, you know, having it something quiet that only the cabinet member knows about is not good governance, and actually it's not good for the people of Plymouth. As well as thinking about people who are disabled and people who are ill and younger people and play, we also need to think about the massive role public toilets play in our tourist economy. And actually, that's where we do focus a lot of our work at the moment, in supporting the economy of the city. And it's going to be very difficult if we suggest a major change away from support of economy to support of other things within a budget. But we will be looking at how we might be able to do things differently. And that's part of the work over the next few months as we do some comparators with people who are doing well.
Councillor Poyser.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo Councillor Nicholson's point there as well about you being open and honest with us, and you know, you've had clearly a lot of resource issues over the last few years. You've reprioritised, refocused where you've needed to. So we understand. I think, you know, this panel understands the reasons why you've had to do that. I think this panel probably lends their full support to you as well across party. In developing a strategy for the city. So, you know, the sooner we have sight of that strategy and the time that we can feed back into that as well, the better, I think, as well. So, you know, work with us, and we'll work with you and officers as well. I think that's really important. A number of things you mentioned there around various different communities, the impact that toilets have. And I think you even alluded to this as well, Councillor Nicholson, around perhaps consultation. You know, speaking with various stakeholders across the city, different groups, industry, businesses. We know that so many people rely on public toilets for so many different reasons, the gig economy, bus services, etc. So I think that would be really useful. And also best practice, what's happening elsewhere in the country, what's happening abroad as well. How can we draw upon that as well? And again, I think, you know, us as a panel, and I'll hopefully speak for everyone here, have got the full support in delivering that strategy here as well. So
I'm not going to go to public consultation before.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think when we come here, we'll need to work out whether actually public consultation is going to assist us in doing anything, given the constraints that we will no doubt be under. And I think when we begin to flesh those out from memory, Anne, our budget is around £300,000 a year for public toilet provision.
That's right, yes.
So we're not talking about very large sums of money in the big scheme of things to try and do everything. And I think if we do go to public consultation, people need to be given choices about what we do and don't do. And that is something that, if we do that, I would want that to come out as a joint decision, because actually, when we see where we're at, which will be the first time this has been public anyway, you might feel that actually that where we've got is appropriate. But I'm not going to make any decisions other than I will bring you where we get to, hopefully in January, if not in March, and we then can work out. I will not be signing off the final thing until I've done that and seen what you have to say as well. However, the longer we leave signing off the final thing, the more in limbo we are. And there is also that degree, which is why I promised in January that I would be coming back within a year.
Is there any further questions, Councillor?
Thank you. And that's, I mean, us as ward councillors, this is a citywide strategy, isn't it? So we know that provision varies across the whole city. I think as any ward councillor, I think it would be advisable to speak to and listen to their residents around the need for public toilets. So if anything information that we have, we can feed that back to you as well. And that includes not just residents, but other service users as well, and people that rely on those best services. If that would be useful to you and the officers, then we'll happily provide that.
As I said, when we bring you stuff back, that is the first stage. I'm not going to go to consultation without having first come here and talked about the issues that we're facing. And we can then work out from there whether we do consultation. I can assure you there are communities across the city who want public toilets where there are not public toilets at the moment. And if we are to provide public toilets where there are not public toilets at the moment, we need to stop providing public toilets where there are, or totally change the model. And that is why I don't want to at the moment say I'm definitely going to be doing anything other than doing a lot of work with Anne, with the new toilets champion once they're in position, and then come back here for that discussion in order that we can work out the right way forward. Because if we can manage to hold a budget at £300,000 a year with no cuts at times of budget pressure, we're doing well, but that isn't very much money to spread across a city the size of Plymouth. It's basically about £1.20 per person per year for public toilet provision. That's not very much at all. And if you bring visitors in, it's well under £1 per head. And so, we are working with very scarce resources, and we're going to have to make some citywide decisions. And that's what we will come back to you with in terms of some of the things we've looked at, some of the options, if we take those options, the implications of those options. And if we go to consult with the public, those are the things that the public is going to need to be aware of as well. It's not going to be what would your ideal city of public toilets be, but in the situation we're in, how can we best spend the resources we've got to achieve the things that matter to the city? And the thrust, even though not fully written up, was that we support the economy through public toilets as our first priority, and other things later. Now that might be right or not, but that's where we are at the moment, and that's what I've inherited from the work that Councillor Shea did. And that's where we are currently investing. But we're not going to be spending, other than St Budo, which is a long-standing issue, we're not spending lots of money on public toilets until we know where it is that we're going in a direction, so that we then make it. But that £300,000 isn't very much to maintain and pay for the upgrades that have already happened on a whole load of toilets around the city as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris, for the frank, again, appraisal of the issue. Now, some members may be worried or concerned to how this ended up on the agenda today. But what we've been trying to do with the committee is obviously look at the result of previous work programmes that haven't been carried forward, and that's why it was put on the agenda today to give an update from the previous programme. So what we're trying to do is not only introduce new topics, agenda items, but also look at the previous work programme and try and clear that at the same time. So that's why Chris has been invited here today to give you an update on that as a direct result of the previous programme. So basically all we're doing is playing catch up on some of the issues. So needless to say, from the committee, thank you for the good work and for your frank and honest appraisal, Chris, much appreciated from the committee.
If I might beg an indulgence, Chair, over the course of this municipal year, could I request that you potentially hold a task and finish group on the council tax support scheme? The reason I'm saying that is your meeting cycle won't hit the cycle that we need to do with engagement and legislatively required consultation in order to hit the cycles of decision making. But we are looking at making substantial changes, or what I'll describe by legislation as substantial changes. I would like those to come to scrutiny if possible. And I think rather than necessarily calling a whole extra meeting for that, a task and finish group would be helpful to me in order to ensure that backbenchers have been able to see changes to the council tax support scheme. We can work on the timings, but it would probably be November, and you have a meeting in October, which is probably likely to still be when the consultation's open, where you have a meeting after Cabinet have to approve some things in principle to help budget setting. So there was a request there, if possible. All changes in the past to the council tax support scheme have been done through a task and finish group established by this panel. So that's the precedent that was set in the past, and I would welcome that again if possible.
I certainly have no objections to that, Chris. Does that, any other member have any objections to a task and finish group to actually put in place that recommendation? Well, we'll certainly carry that forward. If you could keep informed with us and let us know, so the members can be informed, obviously, to the content and the direction of, then that'll be fine. I have no problem with that whatsoever. Just let members know as well, is regarding the Serious Violence Duty Action Plan and funding proposal, obviously the slides weren't made available to you, so Gary's going to be making them all available to you, because I think there was some very good information in there.
I'm just circulating them now.
Oh, it's lovely, thank you. Needless to say, thank you very much, Chris, for your time, and we look forward to speaking in future with regard to that item that you've just brought up. That takes us neatly on to item 9.
So should we say thank you to Anne?
I can pop her an IM and say thank you from the committee, if you'd like.
Yeah, if you could pass that on, Hannah, thanks to the committee, to Anne for. As I said, we're running slightly ahead of schedule. It's only 5 minutes, but we're looking at the work programme going forward, which is page 31, agenda item, obviously 9. Obviously today we've looked at the serious violence, the plan for the public toilet review. For the next scheduled meeting on the 16th of October, the plan is for the introduction of from the Chief Operating Officer, a bereavement services update, obviously with regard to the crematorium. But I think it was previously identified from the last, obviously it wasn't an official scrutiny group, but I call it a discussion group amongst ourselves, that obviously there's a realisation once the funding goes over to the new crematorium, we've still got the maintenance of the existing facilities. And many years ago, we did criticise Ford Park for being overgrown, etc., etc. So what's going to become of those sites, looking at possible financial reports to the cost of maintenance of those sites going forward, because obviously that has to be attached to the operating budget for that, which we identified, that's been put into the programme now. And what we did request, let's call it a focus group, a general update from street services on the performance. I think we need to just concentrate on the 16th of October with regard to the work programme, because that's obviously the next meeting coming up. Is there any suggestions or anything that people want brought forward on that?
They're probably big enough topics in their own right. And on the bereavement services update, could we perhaps have a position statement on the finances for the park?
I can request the officers include that. Yep.
Yeah, that's noted, Patrick. If we can make sure that ends up in the minutes, please. Yeah. Lewis. So, yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I struggled with this a little bit. So I've been through quite a lot of the forward planning documents and quite a few of the previous agendas for this committee and other scrutiny committees. It's really difficult. As Councillor Plymouth just said there, he's got a piece of work he's working on which would fall inside the remit of our scrutiny committee.
Yeah.
And because of the timings of our meetings and their meetings, they don't really link up, and it's difficult to schedule them appropriately. Is there a way of us getting a clearer understanding of all the things that are coming up that fall inside this committee's remit? Because at the moment you've got a forward work plan that's got quite a lot of projects on it, but there's obviously lots of relevant cabinet and other projects going on that we're not seeing, and there's not really anywhere for me to see all of that, like a list of what that work is, for me to say we should be talking about this thing, we should be talking about this thing, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense, but I think the problem that we've got with this committee is there's a lot of into growth and infrastructure. Some parts of growth and infrastructure, and we've got our agenda, and there is a conflict at some point. And I think it's that separation which has caused the problem with this. Say the capital projects, obviously the crematorium, for example, is a growth and infrastructure technically, but regarding the service provision, there's more on our side of the agenda. Does that make sense?
Could I make a recommendation that we invite the relevant cabinet members for this committee to come and give maybe like a 5-minute update each about what's coming up in the next 6 months for them in their cabinet roles? And then that will give us a committee.
If I could make a suggestion, I completely see the point you're trying to make, Councillor Allison. I'm just thinking about the fact that your next meeting, isn't until October, and the availability of cabinet members, and wonder if maybe you could make a recommendation that they provide that via email to everybody, and it might just happen a bit quicker. That's all.
Just to say thank you, Hannah. I think that's a very worthwhile suggestion. Are you happy with that, Liz? Yeah. So what we do is just request that the cabinet members inform all the members with regard to the agenda items on their side and where they're going with it. Patrick?
Thanks, Trev. Just picking up on Councillor Allison's point. What's the status of the forward plan, Hannah? Is it up to date, or how often is it being published these days? Because the technical answer to Councillor Allison's query is that the forward plan is the forward plan of the cabinet, for which key decisions are going to be made. So Councillor Allison's absolutely right. We should probably have an overview of the forward plan to make sure our work programme does. All I would say through you, Chair, to Councillor Allison is that we're here to decide what we want to scrutinise and not be monopolised by the cabinet, which is an opportunity which can happen. You can be doing all the work the cabinet wants to do and you don't do anything you want to do as a committee. So it's always getting a balance, but I think the forward plan would be a useful place to start. Apologies, Hannah, it probably comes out and I ignore it, but what's the status?
That's all right.
These days?
Don't worry, it's absolutely fine. So I can circulate the link to everybody. The link remains the same. So each time we update it, it's still the same link. So you could bookmark that, go back to it. And obviously, apart from sort of pre-election periods, and obviously we've had a couple of those this year already, it is done on a monthly basis. So believe that the most current one is listed as July. We also list it on the public notice board. So if members are happy, I will circulate that via email after the meeting.
Thank you.
Tess?
Can I make a request that in our work programme we also include the public sector equalities duty that we have as a council, just in terms of monitoring whether we're compliant and what it is that we do under that? I think that does fall under the remit of this panel.
Sorry.
Are you happy with that, Hannah? That we could sort of...
So sorry. Yes, if I will definitely confirm it falls under the remit, and then if it does, I will add it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was more than happy to sort of put in a 15-minute, 30-minute slot, obviously, to make sure.
Are you looking to put that on a particular meeting, or just because obviously what I can do is just put it in items to be scheduled, and then when we meet with both of you to do the agenda sets, you could then decide where it goes if you're not sure at the moment or want to discuss with officers when it would be best.
Yeah, I concur with obviously the Vice Chair that, yeah, we just put it in items ready coming up, if you're happy. Anne? Pam?
Yeah. Yes, not Pam, Anne. So, a couple of things, if I may, please, Chair. Right, so can we actually go ahead, are we actually able to go ahead and set the task and finish group dates now for the council tax support that Councillor Penbathy was talking about?
If you're through you, Chair, if you're happy for me to come in, I would say that'd be fantastic, but without knowing the exact deadlines from Councillor Penbathy, and because obviously he said that the meetings in October and December are not good. I don't want to go and put something in for the beginning of November and find it actually needed to be the end. But I can certainly try to set that as soon as possible so it's in everyone's diaries.
That would be great. Thanks, Hannah. It's just just being aware of how quick everybody's diaries are filling up now, I'm just thinking sooner rather than later if we could have that date set. And then for the December meeting, we've got housing and homelessness on the agenda. Can we, on housing and homelessness, sorry, I've got to change my glasses over. I can read it then. When we are looking at that, can we concentrate on Councillor Penberthy, Matt Jarrett and Jackie King's talking about what work they're doing around on temporary accommodation and what preparation they're doing for the winter period? So are they opening up any additional accommodation for the homeless over the colder winter period? Like I know places have been opened up over the winter times before. So it'd be good to get some specific updates around that. And also get an update as to what is going on with private sector accommodation for accommodation that's being purchased for housing homeless and so on. I'm losing track of my words, I'm sorry, I'm a bit tired. But yeah, so if we can cover some of those specific areas, that would be good. But it also leaves us a gap on the agenda as well, doesn't it? Because that's only kind of like one item on the agenda. So we could take another item off the backlog area and pop onto the agenda.
Yeah, and can I just stop you there? What we agreed at sort of the last focus group meeting was obviously to take us up to the end of the year. We didn't want to flood the agenda with loads of items, so you couldn't give proper respect to, you know, a topic just this afternoon. So that's just why we've tried to keep it to a 2 or 3 item agenda, so you don't become overburdened. Like audit and governance, we had 600 pages of financial accounts and that. You can't give proper scrutiny of that amount of paperwork. So it was the idea to be able to scrutinise properly, look in depth and make sure everybody's heard, point one. So what we were going to be looking at in October was, because this was a subject that did come up in the last focus group, was about housing, homelessness. And I think, if I remember right, Hannah, it's in the paperwork that we're inviting the social housing providers to this committee. Yeah.
Yep.
That hasn't
So when
that hasn't been diaritised yet, but the idea of the focus groups is to bring items like that in. And so we were looking in October to have an unofficial meeting, the focus groups, and members can come in. And what we could do is make that specifically then with regard to homelessness, the issues that the city face, because obviously Section 21's going. There's a lot of private landlords. I was at Michael Spy's funeral the other day speaking to a developer who's selling off all his properties, because like he said, the tenants are going to have more control than what he has. Whatever the argument, I don't hold a view. So it gives us a chance to have that discussion, formulate an agenda, specific agenda items for a meeting and carry that forward. So are you happy with that? So in October, we'll have the informal meeting again, just of members, just to sit down, and if there's any issues you want to bring with regard to homelessness, we can have an open, frank discussion. Like I said previously, no matter how hot it gets in the room, right, the most important thing is that people walk out that door and they're still friends. There's nothing's personal it's about. But to bring your wishes in, whether you agree or disagree, and then formulate an opinion, take it forward, and then we put it straight on the agenda, if you're happy with that. Neil?
Just seeing that December we've got the housing homelessness delivery anyway. I mean, I'm sure a lot of that will be incorporated on that meeting. So rather than having another agenda, I mean, we could always speak to Councillor Penberthy sort of prior and just say there's a few particular areas where Anne's sort of got questions, but I'm sure that will incorporate, you know, the winter resilience plan with homelessness and all that kind of thing. That'll all come in then, I would think.
All right, can I just bring Hannah in, Neil?
Yeah.
So forgive me if I've got this wrong, but from picking up on what you've said, Chair, you were we've got housing and homelessness as a sort of general item on the agenda because it covers such a huge area. When you all had the work programming session last month, I have made notes on the specific issues that came up then. So I can absolutely add winter resilience to that, because as Councillor Finn says, part of that was to make sure that we invite all the social housing providers. What I thought Councillor Finn was saying was that it would be worth the committee talking about that and making sure that all the issues you wanted to discuss were covered in October. So if that was the case, Chair, my suggestion would be that you have an informal discussion following your 16th of October meeting, and then I can give you the list of issues that you've particularly drawn attention to, and then we can sort of make sure that that is addressed within the housing and homelessness item.
That was a very good summary, Hannah. Neil, are you happy with that? Because it's such a vast area and there's so many different parts to it. Can you condense it into just the one meeting or not? As I said, we've got the housing, and this is why when we looked at the work programme previously, who better these are the people we actually rely on to provide the homes largely, other than the private sector, in to discuss their current situations, their dilemmas going forward, what houses are going to become available, how are they going to become available. I know for child and parenting, for example, that we did a suggestion that was made at one of the panel meetings was that we, especially for our children in care as corporate parents, no provision was actually made for the kids when they leave Merivale Road. Where do they go? They go onto the housing register, they get a Band B and they're forever bidding, but don't actually achieve nothing. So a suggestion from that committee was to say, well, look, has anybody thought of it, that we approach the social housing providers, you've got Sovereign, Guinness, obviously Live West, PCH, etc., and say, would you be prepared to allocate a couple of properties each year to help move that a smooth transition to those kids that we have in care into the homes? And yes, by the approach of the committee, they agreed and are providing properties now. So we have a transition of the kids moving out of I call it a training establishment, training for independent living, into independent living in reality once they leave our care. So it was to look at, as I said, there's so much involved here. It was to give the idea of the focus group or the meeting was for people to actually sit down and say, well, look, what do you think? Have you got a suggestion in regard to it? 'Cause that just came up at that meeting. Nobody had thought of it previously, not even the officers, but it became a question that was asked and was able to work. So that's the sort of thought behind it, shall we say.
Yeah, I was expecting that when you said that we'd have a sort of bit of a forum after the October meeting, that's fine. So that's where we could get a few of the pointers where so we've got the December meeting with the housing and homelessness.
Yeah.
After the October meeting, there could be a few particular areas that we'll discuss that we could give the cabinet member a couple of pointers that when he does the homelessness delivery, that we pick up those as well. So we've discussed it in October after the formal meeting. Give Chris a couple of sort of pointers. That's some areas we would like to talk about, rather than just being a general. And then we've sort of covered everything for the specific homelessness and housing meeting. So that it was just basically just trying to incorporate. So some of the items that Anne brought up, that we specifically can have them addressed by Chris, so we can all, organise that amongst ourselves during the informal October meeting or the after the meeting, and then put some pointers to Chris. Was my point really, just so that we don't get to the December meeting. Chris has given us delivery, and there's a couple of things that we wanted to ask, but he hasn't got the answers for. So if we could give him a bit of a prime before, he comes with the facts and figures and the relevance of things we need to know. So hopefully that covers what Anne was sort of coming from as well, hopefully.
No, I think that makes total sense, because obviously there's a warm rooms initiative, especially if it's a cold winter. Like you said, what provision have we got? Obviously the voluntary sector certainly helped last time regarding the Plymouth Christian Centre, etc. And a lot of churches got involved in that to make sure everybody had a warm space. It was warm space initiative, wasn't it? I think so. There's a lot of issues that come in on that side to get us through the winter, as well as long-term issues facing the council and where we go from here. So I think that's absolutely brilliant. So that's what I said. This is the idea of this forum and scrutiny committee as well. So if you've got any suggestions, bring them in. Let's debate it and get it into a programme for a discussion and a debate and try and, because what we don't want to do is end up a talking shop and achieving absolutely nothing. What I've said to this committee, I'd like to see a a beginning, a middle and an end to see that things are successfully carried through, so people feel that we've actually achieved something as a committee. Angela Penrose, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, it's going back a bit and it may be irrelevant as sort of slight point of clarification because Tess mentioned the equalities issue. Yeah. And I just wondered if, to what extent this group is sort of coalescing with Chris Penberthy's work with EDI work, because I was looking, because, you know, he has been drawing up EDI objectives with policy team members, and there's an EDI action plan. And it did strike me when I was looking at the EIA of the serious violence strategy, there's quite a lot of common ground. And so when you raised that, I just thought it might be worth somebody ensuring that they are dovetailed. I think they are, but there's lots of things that I know are on the Equalities and Diversity and Inclusion Action Plan that actually fit in with the monitoring of the serious violence strategy, which are not included in.
No, thank you for that, Angela. Can I bring in Hannah on that one, please?
I don't know if this is sort of irrelevant, but just...
No. It's just to reassure you that we did have a member of the policy team come to the February meeting of obviously what was the performance, finance, and customer focus scrutiny, who gave an update on equality objectives and what they were going to be. So we did have an update on that. We did ensure that I think the committee resolved to get the link sent round to all councillors to contribute. So obviously, yes, that item that Councillor Blight mentioned, I've noted to add to the work programme, but it was just to reassure you that we have had equalities objectives discussed at the committee within the last 6 months.
Thank you, Chair. And just, I think all these objectives have since then gone to all the relevant cabinet ministers, so it probably is coming together. But there's a lot more now than there was in February. Okay, thank you.
Let Ian go first.
Ian first. No fighting, please.
No problem, thank you, Chair. I think it was just on housing still. Just want to make absolutely sure for everyone in the room, on the panel, for those people that might be listening, that there is some crossover potentially between overview and scrutiny for growth and infrastructure on housing. Yeah. So when we're talking about house building and any strategy around house building, where does that sit? Does it sit with growth and infrastructure, or does it sit with this panel? Growth and infrastructure.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's that. I think that needs to be clear, that because we've talked a lot around strategy and housing and homelessness. At what point do we get sight of that? Because obviously a lot around growth has an impact upon communities, doesn't it, and services, which we pick up here. So I think there's probably a challenge for us as a panel and the growth panel as well on how we link up more on something like housing. It's sort of a big topic at the moment, and there's lots of plans at national level and local level around this subject. So, and perhaps the public would like to see more of that kind of joined up thinking, because we know that, you know, the ongoing complaints are things like, oh, you know, it's either the wrong place or the wrong house, or when they build something, the infrastructure isn't there, the sewage support works aren't there, you know, all those types of topics that we'll pick up in this panel. So I just thought I'd raise that as a potential issue.
No, thank you for doing that, Ian. Yes, I think, remember, growth and infrastructure actually build the houses. It's about the communities thereafter. So if we build 1,000 houses, what services have we got to meet that? Is there enough GPs? Is there enough green spaces? Is there enough school spaces, etc.? So this is where we've got to be absolutely clear. But it's not to say, though, is that we can't come up with something from this committee and send it over to growth and infrastructure. So if there's any issues you have with regard to that, don't be afraid to bring that forward either. And we're happy to, Tess and I'd be happy to make sure your concerns are raised with growth and infrastructure, because it may be something that they've not thought of, for example, or they need to factor in with regard to a local plan. So it's an open forum, so don't think there's anything such as a bad suggestion. if there's, or something you feel a bit embarrassed to say it, but no, don't. Even the smallest insignificant point could be something that we may not be able to deal with here, but we could pass over and elicit answers from them as well. Tess? Councillor Nicholson, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I think Gary was trying to. Did you want to come in, Gary, before I?
That's fine. I think I just wanted to also, really, I think listening to Councillor Polio and then earlier on Councillor Neil Hendy talking about these things, your process is right, isn't it? So do something in October, understand the detail of what it is you'd like to get the more focused, attention of at your next scrutiny. And in that process, where there are things that might hit growth and infrastructure, I think we can then frame them and get them across to them in the right way. Housing is a citywide issue and it crosses lots of areas, and I think that approach that you're taking probably feels really sensible from my point of view. So I just wanted to kind of add that.
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Chair. The only point I wanted to make is there's just been an executive decision made, I think last week, for the procurement or purchase of with £15 million of capital monies, properties in the city. So when we've got our bit on or debate on housing, it might be that's a topical issue. It's about delivery. It's not about strategic. I think it's strategic to an extent. But the Cabinet member might want to give us an update on that executive decision because it will be a few months down the road to being implemented. So I'll just bring that to the table, Chair.
Thank you for that, Patrick. Clearly noted. So like I said, the idea was we didn't want to sort of go too far into next year with regard to the work programme. Just look at what we've got in front of us, get to where we need to get, have another informal meeting to sort of say, well, where do we go for the next 6 months? And obviously, but bearing in mind what's gone before us, that there's certain items on the agenda we need to bring forward and obviously for discussion. So is everybody happy with that on agenda item 9? Ian?
Thank you, Chair. Only one possible amendment, if the Chair panel are in agreement with that, and that's on household waste and recycling, whether we could bring in waste reduction and reuse into that as well. Obviously, they're equally as important in managing waste within our city. So,
I'm happy to do so. Is everybody else happy with that?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Yes, it will certainly be carried forward. Lewis. Oh, sorry, Hannah first, and then Lewis. All right.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to disrupt the flow. It's only that the conversation sort of went on, and I just wanted to make panel members aware. Sorry. I've just checked the constitution, and it isn't explicitly clear on where the council tax support scheme falls, but it was just to let everybody know that I will keep you all updated. If it doesn't fall within this remit, it will fall within the remit of the Scrutiny Management Board, but I will get to the bottom of it. It was just to let you know, and obviously if it doesn't get added to your work programme or there isn't a task and finish group, then obviously I'll inform everybody which way that goes. Sorry, just wanted to add that in.
No, thank you for that clarification. If you can inform all the members as and when it's known. Lewis?
Yeah, just following on from Councillor Poyser as well. I'm not sure whether it falls in the remit or not based on the description, but food waste as well, if that's, is that a part of this? Yeah, perfect.
Is there any further questions? All right, Nick. So tracking decisions, page 35 to set. Basically, it's just a note to ask you to note the tracking decisions. If there's anything with regard to that you want to bring forward, do so. No? Anything? No?
Just me, Chair. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Only because we're under tracking decisions. Obviously, we just mentioned that you had the recommendation earlier. So if you're happy for me to read out the proposed wording for your recommendation for the letter for the OPCC, if I could have a vote from the members on that one, is that okay?
Absolutely, go ahead, Hannah.
Yeah, okay. So the committee agrees to write a letter to the OPCC to ask them to release the reduction of serious violence funding as soon as possible to enable projects and allow work to get underway as soon as possible. This letter would be, we'll obviously speak to officers and get a draft, and the chair would then sign it on behalf of the committee.
Chair, I mean, it was stated that the funds have already been released. So this is more like a condemnation that the funds were delayed, resulting in a delay of the project by 3 months. So it's pointless us asking for the release of funds. They've already been released.
No, thank you for that observation, Jeremy. Lewis? That's the same point. So can we clarify that, Hannah, please?
Right. So I was reading I was just taking it from you have to apologise, so I haven't been able to rewatch the meeting. So I heard what Councillor Allison had said and was just reading the risk, which said that the conditions of the grant had only been confirmed on the 30th of May, and therefore the funds had not been released to the council and the projects have not received any funding to date. And that was the listed risk. If you'd like me to change the wording of the recommendation, obviously I can.
Anne and then Lewis?
But basically, yeah, the Councillor Hayden confirmed that the funds had been released, but what
Right.
should have been a 12-month project had been reduced to an 8-month project because of the delay in the funding being released.
Okay.
So, they've got 12 months worth of funding, but they've got 8 months in which to spend it.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
you know, they don't get 12 months from the day they received the funding. And that becomes a problem as well.
Patrick?
Thanks. I think if we just generally slightly change the recommendation that we write to the Police and Crime Commissioner, not the office of the Police and Crime, but the actual Commissioner herself, asking that in future grant funding that's passported through her office is immediately given, distributed to local authorities at the earliest opportunity. And then in the letter you can put the context that, we've lost 3 months because it's taken that period of time to release the fund. I would suggest we word the recommendation in that light, so that hopefully as they're learning from experience, and in the future they will actually passport it through from the beginning of the financial year.
Yeah, it's totally reasonable. Is it? Any further input on that point? No.
Can I reread it? Is that all right? I've edited it, if that's okay. So the committee agrees to write a letter to the Police and Crime Commissioner asking that funding that is passported through their office is passed on to local authorities as soon as possible in the future to stop delays to projects.
Everybody happy with that one?
Wordsmith it, but that's fine. I think the spirit is known.
Yeah.
All members can agree that.
Yeah, the more clear and concise it is, the less ambiguous, and with a get-out clause for them. Sorry? Oh, Jeremy, sorry, Jeremy.
And just for context, because if they just receive this on its own, they're not going to understand what the context of this request is that we need to have some wording noting that this current project was delayed by 3-4 months because of delay of funding passported through this office. And with that context, I think it makes sense. Thank you.
Absolutely, I think that's a very pertinent point, that obviously it's the delays of the project which is causing the problems, yeah, and the funding obviously not being released ASAP, as soon as practically possible, shall we say. Lewis?
Maybe to add or include prior to the start date of the funding period, because it had a set funding period, which was the financial year. So everything should have been arranged prior to that beginning of the financial year. That's the point where it should have been organised. You can't run a scheme that's got a set period and then not have the scheme ready before that set period begins.
I think ultimately the chair and vice chair will sign the minutes off, and the recommendation will reflect the discussion, can't it? But I think we've got enough to approve it, and you can do your little bit of tweaking if necessary with Hannah.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say, well, let's agree a form of wordings, and when the form of wording's agreed, again, every member will be informed as to that form of wording that's derived as a result of the discussion today. So not to put Hannah under too much pressure there. So we'll agree it, you'll be informed of it, and if there's any problems with it, just get back to us on it. Needless to say, I'm going to... Yes, that's what I was going to do now. That's what I was going to do now. No, it was just to say, get that point out of the way. So can we have a vote on the recommendation, especially with regard to the context of the letter that's being sent to the Police and Crime Commissioner? Is everybody happy?
Do we need a formal proposal and a second to the recommendation, then go to
We
the
need
vote?
to formally propose it and second it. I don't think we do we? I'm happy to accept. Is there any objection, shall we say? All right, so therefore it's unanimous. Everybody agree it's unanimous? It's a unanimous. All right, so it doesn't need to be seconded, yeah. Yeah, I know with some votes, yeah, you've got to have a proposal and seconder, but not so much from this committee. Needs to say to the people viewing, to the officers involved and everybody that's had input in today's meeting, including yourselves, thank you very much for your help and support, and I hereby close this meeting.
Thank you, Hannah.